As President Trump continues to escalate issues of peace in the Russia-Ukraine war, trying to find diplomacy, trying to find any way to end that war, things are moving in the opposite direction in the Middle East. Trump is continuing to build up more and more combat power, using more and more provocative language. That means the region is moving closer and closer to the beginning of an unpredictable war or outcome that nobody can predict right now, because so much dynamic is going on. But the pieces that are in play here could be worse than anything we've seen in the Middle East, going all the way back to 9/11. And that is saying something. And if you think this is hyperbole or making a mountain out of a molehill situation, let's take a look at what's going on here. First of all, I want to take a look at a Senate hearing yesterday where Senator Tom Cotton was was questioning the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff nominee, General Kane, and he was asking him specifically about the Iran issue.
There's some hysteria about the prospect of the president ordering these strikes, or someone like you in uniform providing him advice, that it's going to lead to another forever war or another endless war. Are you aware of operations, maybe operations against Iran, like the tanker wars in 1988, in which the forceful but discriminate application of military power did not lead to a forever war or an endless war, but rather led to peace and stability?
Yes, sir. Those examples in our history do exist.
Maybe the Qasem Soleimani Strike in 2020 as well, that caused Iran to pull in its horns for the rest of President Trump's first term. Thank you, General Kane.
Yeah, that's what we need. Let's use military power to bring peace and stability, because that always works out so well. And he wants to cherry pick some issues, Senator Cotton does there, about saying, do these situations exist in American history where we use military power, lethal force, and created peace and stability? And the general says, well, those do exist. It appeared to me, and I'm hopeful of this, that he was kind of trying to be non-embracing of the idea, but he still said, yeah, they do exist there. And as one great example that Senator Cotton mentions is Qasem Soleimani. More on that in just a minute, because that is very important here. Now, Senator Cotton had previously asked him, do you agree with President Trump's comment that Iran cannot be allowed to get a nuclear weapon? And that is the key issue here, because that is what's being claimed as the casus belli for all of this military buildup. And yet we see over and over that the Iranians themselves, that even the Mossad, the CIA, all say there is no weapons program. Ergo, what is driving this compelling desire to have all this military force and these huge threats? And by the way, Trump has given what amounts to an ultimatum to Iran that you will either agree to negotiate it into this crisis, which we're calling it, or there's going to be hell to pay. And interesting, you know, I use the word there, crisis, in air quotes, because there wasn't one until we created one. Interesting also that in that clip with Senator Cotton, you also saw him use air quotes on forever wars. He is wanting to say, don't worry about this. This is not going to have any negative impact. It's going to lead to peace and stability. If we use force, it'll only be for something good. Don't worry about it. If that sounds familiar, it should. And if that makes you start twitching a little bit, it definitely should do that too, because that's very nearly what Donald Rumsfeld said in 2003 with George Bush about going into Iraq. It's going to be a shock and awe. We're going to knock them out. Flowers and parades, everybody loving us, all this kind of stuff, and didn't quite work out that way. Any rational analysis would have shown you beforehand it wasn't going to work out that way, but we blithely went through it because that's just what we wanted. We wanted it to work out that way, so we just said it and then did it, and we're shocked when it didn't work out. And of course, they just blame someone else, as is going to be the case to do here. The chances of this resulting in peace and stability, while maybe theoretically possible, hypothetically possible, in reality, the most the far most likely outcome will be an explosion of violence, and it will not end in anything peaceful, quick, or painless. And it could spark an even bigger regional war that could get us sucked into something that is the very opposite of what Trump has existed in his whole time, going all the way back to 2016 when he was running for president. He was always saying no stupid wars, specifically in the Middle East. Those wars are all dumb. Let's don't get those. The Russia-Ukraine war, let's try to get that off the table. Let's find peace. Let's stop all the killing of all these, these beautiful people he keeps talking about on the both sides of the line, which I'm all for. I'm a big supporter of that. But one has to wonder why this dramatic, like 180-degree opposite approach in the Middle East, when everything else from his history and his current situation on the other wars are towards diplomacy and peace. Well, we'll touch on that also in a second. But first of all, since Senator Cotton mentioned the Soleimani issue, that led to peace and stability, he said. Well, did it really, though? First of all, let's take a look at what actually happened in the immediate aftermath of the Soleimani strike.
On the night of the Iranian missile attacks and the hours immediately following, President Trump and Pentagon officials said there were no injuries from the missile strikes and that the damage was only minimal.
No Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime.
The U.S. forces benefited from an early warning system, and most were in bunkers at the time of the attacks. But we now know on the very night of the attack, January 8th, a number of service members were examined for concussions, although they returned to duty following the attack.
Okay, that was on the 17th of January. These strikes took place on the 8th of January of 2020. Well, we subsequently found it wasn't 11. It was 100. 100 Americans had injuries of various sorts, some serious traumatic brain injuries. But you can see from those video images there, the military strikes that Iran hit in retaliation for the assassination of Soleimani was devastated the base. It destroyed all kinds of stuff, and only because we got advance warning, because the Iranians wanted to de-escalate and they wanted to not have to go to general war, but they said we have to do something because of what you did here. So we had advance warning. Guys went to the bunker. I've read a lot of the stories, but it is a miracle. When you actually read the stories of what happened when people got the alert, it is a near miracle that nobody was killed. And so Iran gave us some advance warning, but even that had the serious potential to cause the deaths of the U.S. service members. And let me just tell you, and I was really worried about this at the time. If any of those Americans had been killed, Trump's hands would have been tied. He would have had to escalate again. He would have had to go on to the next level. Because it's one thing you can, in fact, he did say this on that clip I just showed you there. He said in the immediate aftermath, nobody was injured. We're good to go. In other words, it was a tit for tat. We knocked out one of their guys. They responded. As long as nobody else does anything, we're fine. But if instead one of those missiles had hit a barracks or something, or one of the bunkers where the troops were trying to hide and had killed a bunch, his hands would have been tied. He would have had to escalate, and we would have had our war with Iran right then. And listen, just like at that time, we were not prepared for war. We are even less prepared now because of all the ammunition and the weapons and support we've given to Ukraine and to Israel over the last 3 years. And obviously in the last 18 months, it's been double duty to Israel and to the Ukrainians. We don't have enough missiles to get into especially if it's a sustained war with Iran. And if you think that this is like Syria, where you can just launch a few Tomahawk cruise missiles and a few airstrikes here and there, and they'll just fold their wings and go back into a bunker, you've not been paying attention. You've not been seeing the signs that have been going on ever since 2020. These things keep having a cumulative buildup effect, and they are less and less willing to buckle down to anything. So far, the Iranians to Trump's, by the way, if you're not tracking, he sent a letter several weeks back to the Iranians that said, we want a negotiated settlement. We want to have a diplomacy. As long as you do these things, everything's going to be fine. We'll be cool. Well, the only problem is that the everything will be cool part is only if you do what I tell you, which is surrender, which is completely dismantle your nuclear facilities. Everything that's, your legitimate and lawful nuclear power systems, your ability to conduct research, all those things, your centrifuges, any capacity you have to do nuclear weapons, you have to get rid of all that. Oh, and by the way, also significantly curtail your ballistic missile system. That's all we're asking, is to completely demilitarize yourself for nothing in return other than the promise that we won't do anything. But then, of course, you won't have the capacity to defend against anything should we change our mind in the future, which we have some history of doing. So you see, we're setting up a situation where the ultimatum that we're given, it almost requires an answer of no. And if you have publicly said, which the president has, that this is the course of action that we're going to take, either you do this or we do this, and you've given them the conditions that almost guarantee that they won't do that, then Trump will be in the position of either backing down, not following through with what he said, or doing what he said, escalating, and we have the real chance for an explosive war in the Middle East. Now, in terms of the comments, well, I told you that the Ayatollah himself rejected the letter sent by Trump. He said categorically, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to surrender. We won't. So the answer is no. He said that already publicly. Trump gave him 2 months, and I don't remember the exact date it started, but it's 5 or 6 weeks from now before that clock runs out. Meanwhile, you have the IRGC commander, the commander, one of the commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, has made a statement about what he would do if any of this happens. Now, as before you watch this clip here, if you've been watching our show for any amount of time or seen any of the TV hits that I do periodically, I have been absolutely emphatic since at least 2019 of saying all of the troops that we have in Syria and Iraq do nothing but form a strategic vulnerability for the United States. Just having them sit out there in the middle of the desert, not providing any value for the United States, not making us any more secure, not getting rid of the terrorist threat that we keep claiming they do. They just basically mowing the grass is the most they ever do, but it doesn't change anything. But their presence there does pose a significant strategic risk for America, because either if any of these militia, this anti-American militia that live in the area, or Iran decide that they want to attack our troops, they can do it with ease because they're right there. And most of these little troops, or most of these troops, are on little bases which have tactical air defense capabilities against drones or mortars or some of these smaller rockets, but not against ballistic missiles. Many of these bases are completely vulnerable. And I promise you, Iran knows every one of them to a 10-digit grid coordinate to the detail. They know exactly where they are. They know what kind of air defenses they've had because they've been tested ever since then. You had Cotton say that, yeah, we struck Soleimani and it resulted in peace the rest of the Trump term. That's not true. That is not true. In fact, after a short period of hiatus, it began again to where our troops were attacked all over the place, but our tactical air defenses held, and none of them were killed at that time. That didn't happen until 2024, I guess, under the Biden administration, where they kept taking some of these provocative actions. And finally, 3 Americans were killed in Jordan when some of these groups fired back against us. And they continue to do that periodically even now. But when you talk about Iran with ballistic missiles, our tactical defenses won't stop against that. So they genuinely are vulnerable. I know that. I've been saying it for years. Now the IRGC member points it out too. I'm sorry. Yeah, we had some music behind. Let me read this for those who may not be able to read. This is what he's saying underneath. Gary, if you could roll that again, please. The Americans have at least 10 bases and 50,000 forces near Iran. This means they are sitting in a glass room. Someone sitting in a glass room would not throw rocks at others. And you can see that menacing look there. You know what he's talking about there. He's saying that he sees exactly what I do, that he knows that they're vulnerable, he knows where they are, and that if we attack Iran, it's not just going to be that they're going to receive all these bombs and just, hunker down. They're telling you very clearly, if you attack us, I know where your vulnerable troops are. And of course, we also have naval and air assets. There's many other things Iran could do. There are so many downsides to the possibility of going to war with Iran. It just boggles the mind. And when you look at how difficult it is, and I mean, we're talking strategic threat as well of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and all the oil that flows through that. They have anti-ship cruise missiles. They have fast patrol boats. I mean, we could actually lose naval assets in this as well. They have some ability to shoot down aircraft and missiles, though it's apparently fairly weak. unless Russia has secretly given them some air defense missiles that we don't know about, maybe some S-300 or S-400s, which could put our aircraft actually at risk. We don't know about that either, but that's something we have to be concerned about. But the things we do know about are quite significant. And the possibility exists that we could lose a lot of troops, a lot of assets, and at the end of the day, not prevent Iran from going to using its weapon. As a matter of fact, I think I told you in a couple of episodes ago, we were talking about Ali Larijani said that, you know what, we're actually going to go to a nuclear weapons program if you push us in that direction. We haven't done it. We have said from the beginning we're not going to. We have a fatwa against it. But if you keep pushing us and we get to the point to where we think the only way we can defend ourselves is with a nuclear weapon, we will do it. You take this action here and you actually start a war against Iran when they haven't done a nuclear program, then you're almost certainly going to push them into it. And it is a roll of the dice to think that you're going to have enough bunker busters and enough precise intelligence to be able to know where all their components are that will prevent them from having the capability of doing that. The chances are just too high that you push them into that position. And what are you going to do then? Now, we've talked about the 2003 Iraq war that Trump was so much against. And we saw what happened with that. It turned into 8 years basically of an insurgency before we got out. And of course, then Obama took us back in. More on that another day. But that was a big cost. You go in here and you actually don't destroy everything. And now then they actually do put together a nuclear weapon with enough of their facilities survive. Now then they have a nuclear weapon. What are you going to do then? Are you going to escalate to nuclear war? Are you going to say, well, darn it all, we tried to stop them, but now they got it anyway? Because now then, I assure you, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, other regional actors, they're all saying, Kuwait, I think even is one, they're saying, listen, if you go in and do that, and all of a sudden Iran now has nuclear weapons, we're compelled to have nuclear weapons ourselves. Now then, even our allies may advance in this. Or you advance to nuclear strikes against it. And that has, ramifications across the board here. Because believe me, China and Russia are both paying a lot of attention to this. China and Russia are allies economically and militarily with Iran. It seems pretty unlikely to me that both of those global superpowers are going to sit passively by and allow you to just destroy their biggest Middle East client. I don't know what they would do. I don't know that they would be willing to go to direct war with the United States, but it seems reasonable to me that they would do something in the proxy situation where they would provide Iran with some capability, just like what we've been doing against Russia with Ukraine. I don't know why they would do something different. And, this is all so puzzling to me, at least from a certain perspective, because I'm going to go back. I'm going to show you here. I mentioned Trump's accusations about how dumb Bush's 2003 war with Iraq was. Let's take a look at what he actually said back in those days.
The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
Okay, right. I agree with him. I voted for him. That was one of the reasons I voted for him in 2016, because he was standing against the prevailing winds of these guys just want war forever and they want to keep on going. And they thought it was a good idea to go into Iraq. Never apologized for it, at least during that period of time. I'm like, cool, that's the guy we want in power. What happened to that guy? And instead, now then, he seems to have been, I don't know if captured is the right word or influenced, but here's Jack Keane, who is now talking about this situation. I just showed you Senator Cotton, who was obviously a big cheerleader for it. Here's Jack Keane on the neocon side.
The president says this on social media: the choice for the Houthis is clear. Stop shooting at U.S. ships and we will stop shooting at you. Otherwise, we've only just begun and the real pain is yet to come for both the Houthis and their sponsors in Iran. As General, you mentioned, is this sheer force that we're unleashing on them, is that a language they understand? Will it get us the intended effect?
Yeah, it's the only language they understand. It's the only language that Iran understands. And that's been proven. The Israelis have proven it, certainly. The rhetoric doesn't mean anything to these people. The threat doesn't mean anything to them. What is happening now is something that should have happened so long ago. I mean, it's outrageous to think that the Houthis could shut down 80 to 90% of shipping through the Suez Canal, fire at U.S. warships multiple times, deny U.S. warships from moving through the Suez Canal themselves because the danger of all of this. And we take that and we sit back on our hands and watch this taking place and say, and don't admit to ourselves, this is strategic failure. We got to do something about this. We're the world's global leader, and we're going to step forward and do it. And finally, this is happening. And I think countries of the world looking at it are saying, thank God for the United States.
Oh, yeah. Thank God for the United States. Countries around the world are saying, I think it's exactly the opposite. Countries are saying, what in the hell is going on with the United States right now? Why would they go down a path that I just laid out the logic of it? It has almost no chance for success, is the exact opposite of what Trump himself has said in the past. And now he seems to be aligning with neocons. I mean, Cotton and Keene were two of the worst. And now they're all together on this, singing from the same sheet of music. And and obviously John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, all in the Bomb Iran group. And now Trump seems to be on with it. And listen, I'm gonna have to call the bullpen here. I need some help in trying to come to grips with what's going on here. So I'm going to pull Gary in here, and we're going to try to see if we can't figure out what in the world's going on, because the situation now is continuing to escalate. It'd be one thing, Gary, if it was just where we had here, but as you can pop up on the screen here, a little bit of stuff. Here's yesterday a press release from the Pentagon talking about that in line with President's direction to achieve peace through strength, the Secretary of Defense directed the Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group to remain in the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility in support of regional deterrence and force protection efforts. Following completion of a scheduled exercise in the Indo-Pacific region, the Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group will arrive in the CENTCOM AOR to continue promoting regional stability, deter aggression, and protect the free flow of commerce in the region. Gary, who's blocking free flow of transit in the region, and why do we have a second carrier strike group coming to the Middle East?
Well, Danny, I cannot answer that. It's just his modus operandi right now is provoke. It seems that that's what he thinks, and as you just heard General Keene say, is their style, and that's where they're going, Danny.
Yeah, and let me get a little bit more specific. There's also 30% of our bomber fleet, our strategic bomber fleet, has been sent to the Indian Ocean and to the Diego Garcia. That's basically where we would launch any sustained operations against it. And you see there, the Pentagon has used 30% of the Air Force's stealth bomber fleet. Okay, so you got two aircraft carrier strike groups. You have 30% of our strategic bomber strength. Now then, even on the tactical level, there's also A-10s. Tactical air is moving in. And those are for close air support. Those are A-10 Warthogs. These were really famous during the Gulf War when I was actually fighting. And those things are so you're seeing strategic and tactical assets here. And let me just show you, just let me give you an idea here for the region. Here's a map of where a lot of the assets are. They're probably too small for you to see on the screen, but you see there, there's the Middle East. And of course, Iran is just up a little bit north of that. There's Saudi Arabia up in the upper left-hand corner. And all around that, you see all kinds of warships and air power that are stationed around there. There's Diego Garcia. You can see kind of in the middle, if you can look real carefully in blue. It's an island out in the middle of the ocean there, which is within strike range, easy strike range of the Iranian country there. And if you could put that other screen up, Gary. Yeah, this is so you can read some of it. This is what the U.S. Navy has in the region with the Harry Truman Strike Group. All those ships there. The French Navy has some forces also in the Gulf of Eden. There's additional, and I didn't put it on the screen, additional European Navy assets in the area. And then, of course, the U.S. Air Power Diego Garcia with the bombers and those. Another thing, the last one there is also noteworthy because it says 6 KC-135 Stratotankers, 6 of them. That is a huge number, and those are necessary to sustain air operations. So if you're going to have a sustained air capability, you have to have the ability to have these the Air Force on the carriers and maybe even launch from other places. They have to have refueling in the air to be able to get to the targets in Iran and get back. We saw some of that during the 2 times the U.S. air and naval power helped Israel attack into Iran where they had refueling, et cetera, in the air. So the fact that we got 6 there, I mean, man, Gary, that whole map, that looks to me like we've already made a decision we're going to war. What does it look like to you?
Yeah, my gosh, Dan, I was going to ask you, is this unprecedented, this show of force, this amount of power all at one time? Is this unprecedented?
Yeah, I'd have to check the rules. I'm not aware of any. We've sent aircraft carrier strike. In fact, we had 2 during some of these attacks into Iran, but I'm not aware of a continued or of a comprehensive situation where you had the strike groups plus the air tankers plus the tactical air plus the strategic bomber force all at the same time. That I have never seen.
They have built in the redundancy here, boy. They're not taking any chances. And Danny, when they deploy like that, what's the turnaround time for having to come back and to refuel and to inventory everything? Inventory meaning their food and everything like that.
Yeah, that's something that would have to be sustained, and that would take a lot of logistics to do as well. So that's something that would stress the system. So that's the kind of deal to where you're like, okay, you get more than a month or 2 of this, and it's going to start to really be a problem for the rest of your global force packages everywhere else. So that kind of tells you that really within a couple of month period here, I mean, you could go further, but it's going to not without cost elsewhere. So that kind of implies to me that that's the time frame somebody's looking at here, that we either do something or we don't do something within 2 months. But, I mean, how can this work out, Gary? Because we've put our names out on this and said, this is what we're doing. How can we not do it and save face?
I was going to say, the only upside is that nothing happens, because otherwise the downside, if anything happens. Danny, let me ask you this: with the amount of power they have there, is a lot of it defensive rather than off? I mean, obviously it's offensive, but meaning that they're putting it there just to protect our men that are in the arena. But there's like 50,000. We have 50,000 troops there in the arena.
Yeah, we do. And no, this is all offensive. I mean, we have existing, obviously we wouldn't have our troops, in all these places without defensive capabilities. Like I said, tactical air defenses in some of the smaller bases, strategic defenses at some of our bigger air bases and naval bases. So yeah, this is all additional offensive firepower.
Oh, yeah. But I guess what I meant is that I think you have said in the past that these bases that are there really cannot defend themselves to any extent. They can do some minimal defensive maneuvering, but obviously, if Iran really wanted to rain down like what they did to Israel to our bases there, they don't have the capabilities to fend that off. Is that correct?
That is right. And that's what we've had Ted Postel on, the MIT professor, who detailed why that is, because of the kind of missiles. We had Mike Domino, who's currently the Assistant Secretary of Defense right now. He was elevated off of that. He was on our show, and he talked about how, look, these bases don't have the air defense capacity to move off a strategic strike from Iran. They can do the smaller stuff, which they have successfully done against these militia, but not against a state actor like Iran. So they're completely vulnerable. And if Iran makes good on this threat that you saw the IRGC guy have, the Americans are going to die. It's as simple as that. I just can't see how it's any other way.
I agree, Danny. To say we're playing with fire is an understatement.
And Gary, help me out here. What is the motivation here? Now, I say that partially tongue in cheek, because this headline here, if you could toss that last one up there, maybe kind of gives an idea here. But I like to think it's not as simple as that. This is from last month, where Netanyahu vows to finish the job against Iran with support for Trump. I mean, when you read that and then you see what that map I just showed you, the force power that's force packages that have been put into area, kind of looks like Trump is just doing this. Can it be that he just ditched everything that we just showed you, where he was so passionately in 2016, to now get ready to do this because Netanyahu wants it? I mean, can it be that simple?
Danny, all evidence that there is that Trump is so cozy with Netanyahu, and there's a lot of people that are aghast at it, obviously. And I don't know what else to attribute the moves that he's making, except that I hate to even say that he's Netanyahu's puppet.
And it's very puzzling to me, because everything about Trump has always been America first. When he first came into office this second term here, he signed an actual memorandum or executive order, America first foreign policy by name. He put that in there. And I look at all of these things that were unfolded here, and I'm like, where is any American national interest? They don't threaten us. They have, despite all of these attacks and all these things that have happened, going back really all the way back to the Gulf War, and certainly all these things in the last 18 months where Israel attacked the Iranian embassy. They assassinated somebody inside their capital city. They've assassinated a bunch of other leaders in Kuwait and not Kuwait, but Beirut and several other places. And they haven't gone to a nuclear program. So they don't pose a threat. And conventionally, they're a middle in power. They're weak. They're even weaker now than they've ever been. So there is no actual American interest, much less vital national interest or threat that would necessitate this. And at some point, we have to just be able to call a spade, Gary. I think we do.
Yeah, and you know what, Danny, is that Trump doesn't even seem like he's conflicted about it at all. It's going to be, he's basically saying it's my way or the highway. And there's no hesitancy in his pursuit at the moment. I don't see him backing down.
And look, Gary, I got to think that there are plenty of people inside the administration that are screaming, this is a bad idea. I mean, I know some people who are in some of the key positions, and I know what their positions are. And I can't imagine that privately they're not conveying those. And yet, as you just said, I don't see any evidence of even a confliction on Trump's mind. And I got to think, if all these people are telling you this, why would you take this action that has like a 90% probability of backfiring and blowing up in your face and undoing everything that you're trying to do domestically? That's the part that I'm having a hard time coming to grips with.
Yeah, Dan, I don't know. I think if it's the money, if it's the allegiance that he's given to the powers that be, the Israel lobby, Netanyahu, it's clouding his other inclinations to avoid war, and he's tossed it to the side. He's kicked it to the side when he looks at the Middle East.
What do you think the chances are, Gary, that this could start eroding Trump's even MAGA support? It was anecdotal, I admit that, but I saw a tweet this morning by a guy who was an adamant pro-Trump MAGA guy, bragged about or was proud about how he voted for Trump, but he said this issue specifically, he said, I'm like, what in the guy said, what in the hell is he doing potentially starting a war with Iran, which is not in our interest? I voted for him because he was against that kind of stuff. That's one guy, but I got to think that if he does this, he risks losing that support.
Yeah. Oh, Danny, there is a tidal wave of feeling of betrayal with Trump taking the actions that he is now. There's myriad voices out there saying this very thing. People like Dave Smith. I mean, it could go down the list where they believe that Trump has really gone back on what his promises of being wanting and promoting peace. This is now what you're talking out of both sides of your mouth now. You say one thing about Ukraine, and it's a totally different situation when you're dealing with the Middle East, and it's not what you told us you were going to do and who you were going to be. So it indeed is a huge. And
it's if you're only interested in just self-preservation, I mean, there is a midterm election coming up now, closer on the horizon, and this is not going to play well with your base. When you're talking about you need legislative help here, and we already have the Republicans have a razor thin margin in the House as it is. And that could, I mean, you talk about a blue wave. I mean, you could usher the thing in by doing something like this that goes against. If you lose the support of your own emphatic supporters here, then you literally invite a blue wave to come in here, which means your legislative agenda gets frozen for the last 2 years. So why would he want to risk that?
Oh, and then think, Danny, on top of that, if there is no peace deal with Ukraine and Russia, and this does roll on and on and on, he's losing on both sides. Everything that he had planned to do, that he was going to do in the first day before he even was in office, he said he was going to finish. And here he's got two bigger messes than what he originally came in with. He's at a very troublesome time for himself, I think.
Yeah. If we had more time, I'd love to roll all over the Russia-Ukraine stuff, because that looks like that we're playing right into Putin's hands, because he has these requirements, and we're trying to find, we're mad about them because they're not doing what Trump wants, but they're never going to do what Trump is asking for. So he could literally play that into watching as Russia just rolls across what's left of Ukraine. We'll talk about that.
So Danny, the great art of the deal maker can't do it on either end. He's coming up empty-handed in both theaters, right? If that ends up what happening, my gosh.
And you can even
go ahead.
You can give him a benefit of the doubt on the Russia stuff. He maybe overplayed his hand, but man, the other one would be a 100% unforced error. That doesn't need to even be on the table. Now, all I can hope is that he's going to be getting some good advice in here, and that he's going to find some way to look. You can do classic politician stuff and just say, "Oh well, we got everything squared away with Iran, and now they're not going to do anything to far east, and you're not going to go. So we're going to use we're just going to use sanctions or whatever." I think sanctions are a dumb thing, but if that keeps us from going to war, then use the sanctions tool, to prevent doing that. So I hope that those kinds of common sense or rational thoughts seep into the conversation here. It's a separate issue with Netanyahu. He would be upset, but we'll have to deal with that another day. But we need to worry about American interests first and foremost.
Indeed.
Well, anyway, we'll see how it goes out. As we say all the time, until bombs are falling, there's still time for diplomacy. There's still a chance to come up with a better idea and to avoid the bad ideas. And let's just let's hope and pray we continue to go down that line, and we will keep everybody informed of exactly what's happening and the risks to each of these courses of action, because people deserve to know there is an alternative to this one, and it is better for us. And because we're unafraid and unintimidated and uncompromised, we will keep bringing it to them.
Amen.